Okay, third time's the charm, hopefully. Uh, so, the sermon for today is from Exodus 3 1 through 15. And the title is Burn, Burn, Burn. And it's the story of Moses and the burning bush. So, we're going to try this again with closer to the Wi-Fi signal. So, hopefully, it'll work this time. But I listened to a podcast recently, to the first episode of podcast, and this podcast is called Don't Keep Your Day Job by Cathy Heller. Her entire podcast is encouraging people to pursue their dreams instead of wasting their life away at a back-breaking job that they hate. The podcast is full of inspiration as well as practical tools to turn your passion into a profession. I love this. I love seeing people in their element, on fire with passion. I love it when people live into their potential. Bonus points if you can make a living from it. In the Christian world, we usually use the word calling to describe what happens when God appears before people with a job for them, a holy task, a divine calling on their lives. We use this term for the pastoral profession. I have been asked to share my call story on multiple occasions. But what about people who aren't in the ministry profession? Have you ever been asked to share your call story? We forget that God has placed a call on each and every one of us, no matter if you're in ministry or not. Unfortunately, in our Western world, we form our identity around our profession, not our calling. When you meet someone new after learning their name, what is one of the first things you might ask someone? What do you do? And what we do in life is somehow also caught up in our identity. People don't just do dentistry, they are dentists. Somehow, a job becomes a lifestyle, a part of who you are, if not all of who you are. So who are we at the end of the day? Who are we when we strip away what we do? I wish we asked people a different question. I wish we asked people what gets them out of bed in the morning, or what burns inside of you. My friend had the right idea. I asked her what she thinks her calling is, and she said a storyteller. She is a storyteller. Now guess what she does? She is a videographer and a video editor. She makes videos for Mennonite Central Committee, for MCC. Your calling on your life is not just about what you do. It's the why behind what you do. My friend wants to bring to light the stories of people who wouldn't otherwise have a platform to tell their stories. That's part of her why. Why do you do what you do? What is God's calling on your life? And what keeps you from pursuing God's call on your life if you aren't already? On the morning Moses met God, if you had asked him what he does for a living, he would tell you that he's a shepherd. Moses was on the run, for he had just committed murder on one of his own people. He just killed an Egyptian man. However, Moses wasn't really Egyptian. He was born a Hebrew. Yet he wasn't fully Hebrew either, because he was raised as an Egyptian in the palace as Egyptian royalty. He wasn't living a life of palace grandeur anymore, though. He was doing the back-breaking, dangerous work of guarding and caring for sheep. So at this point in Moses' story, he had just committed murder. He had just gotten married, and he was leading his flock to a mountain, Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. It was there that the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. I think the movie, The Prince of Egypt, actually does a fine job of capturing this holy moment. You see Moses, intrigued by a glow he sees reflecting on the rocks of Horeb. He draws closer, turning a corner to see a bush aglow with holy fire. Bluish flames surround the branches, pulsating as a voice comes from the fire. Moses, Moses. And Moses says, "Here I am. Here I am." He didn't run. He didn't scream. He didn't rub his eyes wondering if he had finally gone insane, that committing a treacherous crime had morphed his brain and driven him mad. It doesn't even say that he was afraid. Why wasn't his first thought one of fear that God had come to punish him for his murderous crime? No, he simply says, "Here I am." Then God says, "Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place you are standing is holy ground." It's interesting that God tells him not to step closer while also asking him to get as close as he physically can to the holy ground that he walks upon. Don't come closer, but acknowledge with great intimacy that you are near the divine. Yet God was not done talking. God reveals part of God's identity. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, Jacob. Now it says that Moses was afraid. Now he's afraid to look God in the eye. Why did this revelation make him afraid if he wasn't fearful before? Undeterred by Moses' fear, God went on, "I have seen the misery of my people. I have heard their cries. I know their sufferings, and I have come to deliver them from their oppressors." Then God uses the language of calling. "So come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." There's a formula of sorts when it comes to calling stories in the Bible, a pattern of what typically happens when God comes and calls someone to a divine task. The pattern goes like this: commission, rejection, and reassurance. God gives the task, commissions someone to act on God's behalf. Then there is rejection, not from God, but from the person God is calling. Moses steps right into this pattern with his response to God's call. Moses says to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt?" Rejection. What is curious is God doesn't say to Moses, "Who are you? Only the perfect person for this job. You were born a Hebrew. These are your people, yet you were also raised an Egyptian. You live in this sometimes uncomfortable space occupied by many people with multiple cultural identities, not quite fully one, not quite fully another, but also kind of being fully both. You are the perfect bridge between these two communities. You are the perfect person to find common ground between the Hebrews and the Egyptians." Moses' rejection, notice, it's a question of his identity. Who am I? Yet God doesn't respond with a reassurance that Moses' identity fits the bill. God responds with a reassurance of presence, God's own presence. Who are you? Doesn't matter. I will be with you, says God. I will be with you. That is what matters. God doesn't even reassure Moses that he will be successful. God just says, I will be with you. Commission, rejection, reassurance. Then Moses says, okay, if you will be with me, then who are you? And what does God say? I am who I am. That is where we get the term Yahweh, a name so precious that some people who practice the Jewish faith won't even say this name out loud. Some Jewish commentators won't even translate this name because it is so holy. They translate it to Adonai or Lord instead. This name, I am who I am, is a verbal form of to be. So in kind of an awkward way, you could translate it, I am the one who causes things to pass. God's identity is a verb. It is creation in action. Maybe our identities are creation in action as well. What are the ways you have heard God's call on your life? When you are still, when you are quiet, what does the still small voice inside of you say? What direction does it pull your heart? What burns inside of you, burns but does not consume? And how do you respond to this inner knowing? I've noticed that when I point out potential in someone, hey, you're an amazing artist, you could do that for a living, I often hear an immediate thesis about why this person can't do what they love. rejection, excuses, a list of barriers between them and their heart's calling. Why are we so quick to reject ourselves? Henry Nouwen has this to say about self-rejection. Self-rejection is the greatest enemy of the spiritual life because it contradicts the sacred voice that calls us the beloved. If God comes to you, beckoning you to embark on your life's task, and you respond by saying, "But who am I?" then you are questioning your primary identity as beloved, and you are questioning the power of the presence of God. As Glennon Doyle says, we are deeming ourselves unworthy of invitations instead of trusting the inviter. Well, the inviter is there saying, "Don't wait until you are ready. Just get up and dance with me. Show up before you are ready. Start trusting the inviter." The calling on your life is the journey to find what lights you on fire yet does not consume you. Instead of growing weary, you grow strong, energized, and excited. However, part of that energy, part of that fire, comes from the deep knowing that you do not do this alone. This calling is not a solo journey in the wilderness. This is a relationship. This is a covenant that binds creation to creator. God is the fuel that lights your fire, that keeps it ablaze. Losing sight of that, of your source, contributes to burnout. Now, I want to make an important distinction here. We live in a capitalistic society, one with the American dream weaved into the fabric of our economy, even our identities. The drive to get ahead, to be successful, to get up and grind, that is not to be confused with God's calling on your life. That is a false sense of identity, a shallow sense of security. Notice, God called Moses to something incredibly specific. God said, "I have heard the cries of my people. I have seen their oppression." Then God calls Moses to open his eyes to the trials of his people. God's calling to Moses is not a get-rich-quick, follow me and be blessed calling. God's calling is one of empathy. God's calling is a task of liberation, seeing, hearing, and responding out of empathy to the plight of God's people. Like Moses first noticing the glow of the burning bush, God is opening Moses' eyes to the generations of persecution, exploitation, slavery. God's call on your life will look different for everyone. It might be to go out and be on the front lines of liberation work. It might not, but it will be liberation. This is your why, a call to open your eyes, a call to empathize. It will set someone free. Maybe it will set you free. Free from the chains of the voices that scream, "You are not good enough, you are not worthy, you do not belong." Free from the chains that keep people from being their authentic, created in the image of God's selves. Maybe the act of creation, maybe all art is inherently subversive, inherently freeing, liberating. Artists, people who create, not just artists like the profession, but people who create something, anything, they don't reject the creation within. They know who they are. They know their why, and they're saying yes to their good inviter. They trust the invitation. They brush off their canvas and they pull out their paints. They roll up their sleeves and they start plucking strings. They flex their fingers and they start typing. They pull out wood and start building. They lace up their sneakers and start marching. They lift their arms and start dancing. They dig into soil and start planting. They open their hearts and start listening. They pull out their staff and start leading. They break chains and start freeing. They sharpen their pencils and start designing. They take a deep breath and start healing. They bend their knees and start praying. They burn and burn and radiate light. They burn and burn, and flames lick their skin, your skin. You burn and will not be consumed. Start before you are ready. Know that God's presence is your fuel. You can keep going. You will keep going. If you are not free, then you are not there yet. If anyone is not free, then we are not there yet. Listen for the calling. Resist the draw to self-rejection. You are the perfect person for your calling, as you are right now. You are who you are. God is who God is. Trust the invitation and trust the inviter, and burn and burn and burn. Amen. Hear these words of blessing. May you, as a beloved creation, find your spark, find your flame, find your fire, so you may burn with the fuel that is God's love and God's presence. Amen. Go in peace.